My name is Professor Sambaba Adamu Tende from Nasarawa State University, KFE Department of Business Administration. We are going to look at Advanced Management Thought and Philosophy, BUS901. BUS901. The course looks at the processes and skills needed to create new enterprises. Students will learn how to take a business idea, assess that idea, and develop an appropriate business model, and will create a plan to conduct a feasibility analysis by studying the environment. Evolution of management thought. Management has evolved and changed considerably over a period of time. Even though the formal scientific management began and established itself in the early 20th century, the recorded use of organized management goes back to 5000 BC when the agricultural revolution had taken shape. This agricultural civilization existed in India, Egypt, and China, and according to Peter Drucker, this irrigation civilization were not only one of the great ages of technological north, it represented also mankind's most productive age of social and political innovation. As early as 4000 BC, the Egyptians were aware of the importance of planning, organizing, and controlling. Perhaps the Great Pyramids of Egypt, built in 2900 BC, are a classical example of management and coordination. The origin and evolution of management can be traced back to the days when man started living in groups. History reveals that strong men organized the masses into groups according to their intelligence, physical and mental capabilities. Evidence of the use of the well-recognized principles of management is to be found in the organization of public life in ancient Greece, the organization of the Roman Catholic Church, and the organization of the military forces. Though management in some form or the other has been practiced in the various parts of the world since civilization began, and it became more complex with industrialization. We discover one basic thing: management has evolved and changed considerably over a period of time. Even though the formal scientific management began and established itself in the earliest 20th century, the recorded use of organized management goes back to 5000 BC when the agricultural revolution had taken shape. This, like I said, agricultural revolution took places in India, Egypt, and of course in China. The history, therefore, of management extends in several thousand years into the past. However, it is only within the late 19th century that management is considered a formal discipline. In other words, the practice of management is as old as the human race, but its theories and conceptual frameworks are of recent origin. It means we've been practicing management where it became theory, and it's formally conceptualized into a framework of very recent time. Management scholars have borrowed and applied the concepts from other disciplines. Impliedly, management itself, the framework, came from other disciplines. Though management theory has evolved as a symbolic relationship to its related and supporting disciplines like mathematics, statistics, behavioral sciences, depriving motivation of diverse framework in order to come out with the principle. Now, evolution of management thought may be divided into 4 stages. You see, we are trying to look at the evolution of management. how management came into its being. And that is why we say it is a thought and a philosophy that early thinkers continue to think. How can people be organized into groups so that there will be that effective coordination of human and non-human resources in order to bring about maximization of organizational resources for it to get result. Impliedly, therefore, the early thinkers classified management thought into 4 major stages. 1, the pre-scientific management period. 2, the classical theory. Under the classical theory tends to be subdivided into scientific management of Taylor, administrative management of Fayol, and the bureaucratic model of Max Weber. The third classification is the neoclassical theory or behavioral approach. Then the fourth, modern theory of modern theory. Now, we discovered that when we are looking at the theory of management, as seen in the introduction and historic perspective, management theories in its early period were not really theories. They were not, but some discrete processes or experiences. For that matter, management theories in this present century is also not totally free from certain problems. To become a theory, an experiment or practice needs to undergo several modifications, synthesis, and tests. For this purpose, a sound theoretical and conceptual framework is essentially for a theory to take shape. Therefore, the modern management theory tend to further be classified into what we call the management process school, the empirical school, the human behavioral school, the social system school, the decision theory school, and of course the mathematical school. Now remember we indicated at the initial stage that we can look at management theory at the perspective of 1, the pre-scientific era, the classical management theory, the neoclassical management theory, and of course the modern management theory. We'll also come to discover one basic thing, that under each group a few schools of thoughts were identified, and these various schools of thought came in with various theories of management. And basically I want us to look at the features of management in the classical period. Management in the classical period, it was closely associated with the Industrial Revolution and the rise of large-scale enterprise. 2, the classical organization management theory is based on contribution from a number of sources. They are the scientific management theory, the administrative management theory, and of course the bureaucratic model, which we are coming to study in great detail. 3, management thought focus on job content, that is division of labor, standardization, simplification, and specialization. This also we are coming to study in greater detail. Elements of the scientific management thought. What brought about scientific management thought? At the pre-scientific era, management was more or less a trial and error of a game. There was no scientific method of doing things. Impliedly, the scientific management theory now advocated a thorough planning of the job by the management and emphasizes the necessity of perfect understanding, and of course cooperation between the management and workers, both for the enlargement of profits and use of scientific investigation and knowledge in order to bring about increase in productivity. And therefore, The classical theory emphasizes on basic things. One, that management should now be seen as a science, not a rule of thumb. As a science, therefore, it means there has to be a method of doing things so that it can be repeated, and once repeated, the pattern has been established. Now again, two, that there has to be harmony among the management and of course workers. And again, when we are working, that there has to be cooperation and not individualism. We must all look at ourselves as working for the betterment of the organization. We must now subject our interest for the interest of the organization. And that if we now do that, maximum output can be put in place. And of course, the development of each man to his greatest efficiency. That's why you will come to see that at that point we will come to overemphasize on this idea of specialization, so that when somebody specializes in a particular skill, there'll be that high efficiency. Now, like I said, we need to look at the elements of the scientific management. Remember, we left the pre-scientific era. During the pre-scientific era, it was more trials and error. But with the scientific management era, we now said, look, activities must be done in a scientific way, the techniques of which Taylor regarded as its essential elements future are normally classified under the following. 1. Scientific tax and rate system along with work improvement. 2. Planning the tax. 3. Vocational selection and training. 4. Standardization of working conditions, including materials, equipment, etc. 5. Specialization. Of course, 6. Mental revolution, radical transformation of the mindset. Impliedly, therefore, the scientific tax and rate setting study said, 1. There has to be method study. Management should try to ensure that the plant is laid out in the best manner and is equipped with the best tools and machinery. The possibility of eliminating or combining certain operations may be studied. 2. Motion studies. It is a study of the movement of an operation or even a machine in performing an operation with the purpose of eliminating useless motions. You see, when the people during that material time studied movement of people within the workplace, and they try to see how they can eliminate unnecessary movement, and still under such tax and rate system, they said, look, there has to be time study. The time study is now more or less like a work measurement. The basic purpose of time study is to determine the proper time for performing the operation, such that a study may be conducted after every motion, and both time studies and motion will help in determining the best method of doing a job. So there has to be a pattern of doing that job. The moment you do that, you now study fatigue. It is a standard tax. If a standard tax is set without providing for measure to eliminate fatigue, it may either be beyond the workers, or the workers may overstrain themselves to attend it. It is necessary, therefore, to regulate the working hours and provide for rest pauses at scientific determining intervals. Of course, rate setting. Taylor recommended a differential piece wage system, under which workers performing the standard task within the prescribed time are paid much higher rate per unit than inefficient workers who are not able to come out with the standard test. Once all these things has been done, that too, you must plan the tax. Having set the tax which an average worker must strive to perform to get the wages at the higher piece rate, it becomes a necessary step to now plan right from top management down so that bottlenecks can be removed and work can be done systematically. And of course, 3, selection and training. Workers that are coming to work in the organization must be scientifically selected. What do we mean by that? Once the workers are being scientifically selected using what we call a job analysis, which will have man specification and job specification at one side, the best people for a particular job can be selected to occupy a particular position. And 4, standardization. Now standardization can now be introduced in the organization, and once tools and equipment are standardized, speeds will be perfected, and of course condition of work to attain standard performance will now be ensured. All these things are part of what a scientific management thought that brings about a mental revolution. Let there be a radical mental revolution of the mindset so that work within a particular organization can be divided into groups. And once they are being divided into groups, it means activities can now be departmentalized. And by being departmentalized, we can now achieve greater output. The big question now is, what becomes the benefits of scientific management? Remember I said, scientific management came into being after the pre-scientific management period era, where works are now being grouped, and in the process of grouping, similar activities are being departmentalized so that it can bring about what? Specialization, standardization of tools, ensuring efficiency and effectiveness in the utilization of organizational resources. The benefits, therefore, of scientific management, based on Taylor's ideas and research, it came out with certain benefits that once work is being done in this era, A, there will now be the replacement of traditional rule of thumb method by scientific techniques. B, that there will be proper selection and training of workers so that only the qualified workers can now be recruited into the organization, trained and placed in the appropriate position. And C, incentive for wages to the workers for higher production. D, very importantly, there will be elimination of waste and rationalization of system of control. E, standardizations of tools, equipment, materials, and work methods. And there can be now detailed instructions that can easily guide the workers in doing the work. However, you come to see that with this scientific management also, there's now proper utilization of various resources, and that's supposed to bring about customer satisfaction because people will efficiently be doing their work. There is still, however, criticism. What are some of the criticism? Because it is based on such criticism. It's based on such criticism that you discover other schools of thought will now come into being. In fact, it's based on the criticism that we find in the scientific era that workers now feel, or management thought philosophers thought that, look, let's think of the administrative school theory. And what are some of the criticisms? 1, speeding up of workers. Scientific management is only a device to speed up the workers without much regards to their health and well-being. 2, that there is now loss of individual workers' initiative. Scientific management reduces workers to automatic machine by taking away from them the function of thinking. Thereby there will be no initiative. Workers are not being allowed to use their initiative because all activities have already been what? Standardized. And there's that continuous method of doing things. And along with the specialization, there will now be problem of monopoly, problem of monopoly. What is the problem of the monopoly? When you continually do the same work over and over, separating planning, by separating the functions of planning and thinking from that of doing. Scientific management now reduces workers to mere routine. They hardly use their initiative. Reduction of employment. Again, that scientific management creates unemployment and hits the workers in the hardest way, because tools are now being standardized. Implying we're using more of technology to do most of the work. And workers are being classified in such a way that we eliminate wastages. In the long run, many workers may not even have a place. And then 5, weakening of trade unions. That under scientific management, the important issues of wages and conditions are decided by the management through scientific investigation, and the trade unions may have little say in the matter. And 6, that may naturally lead to exploitation of workers. Scientific management improves productivity through the agency of workers, and yet they are given a very small share of the benefit of such improvement. Of course, it's based on such criticism that you discover that people came out about with other theories. And when people came about with other theories, with a lot of them bringing in different contribution in the scientific period, we now moved and said, look, let's move away from the scientific period and start looking at administrative management. Remember, in the scientific period, we said, look, under the classical theory, was the scientific period, then administrative management, of course, then bureaucracy. It's based on the limitation of the scientific period theory that people like Henry Fayot, a French industrialist, started thinking of a best administrative way that management can carry out its activities. Of course, it is at that point that administrative management came into being. And in the administrative management, Henry Fayot decided to look at the works of an organization, and he identified 14 management principles. You discover in all organizations now, it is based on these 14 management principles that we continually put in place in order to ensure efficiency, effectiveness, and economy in the utilization of organizational resources. Henry Fayot said, look, let's have a little human feelings in the whole process. And he decided to bring about an administrative management theory. Under the administrative management theory, Henry Fayot said, look, number one, in any organization, for simplicity of work, let there be division of labor, which is specialization. And the specialization will lead to greater efficiency. And the moment, if there's that specialization through the process of division of labor, anybody that occupies a particular position in the organization should be given the authority to use the organizational resources, both human and non-human resources. Therefore, he spoke about authority. Managers now have the authority to get things done. And not only that, that there has to be discipline. Members of the organizations need to respect the rules and regulations that govern in the organization. And of course, 4, he spoke about unity of command. Unity of command. So that once you walk into any organization, you find the organization is now drawn into an organizational structure, giving you a pictorial view of all the activities. And there's always unity of command. What do we mean by unity of command? You are answerable to your immediate superior. And that unity of command gives you unity of direction. So that only one manager should be responsible for an employee's behavior. And very importantly, subordination of individual interest to the common interest of the organization. Any member that come to work in the organization must now subject his own interest for the interest of the what? Organization. Of course, remuneration, pay for work done should be fair to both the employee and the employer. That there has to be also centralization of activities, so that works that are similar must be centralized and have a final responsibility. The scala changed. Order, equity, stability and tenure, initiative, and of course, esprit de corps. If you remember, one of the biggest criticism in the scientific theory is that workers are not being allowed to use their initiatives. They are being reduced more to machines. They only work based on directive. And now for I say, look, you should allow subordinates, they need to be given that freedom to formulate and carry out their own plans. And by doing that, they'll be able to perform better. It's again based on all this that Henry Fayot, who is now considered the father of modern theory of management, classified the whole work in an organization into 6. That all activities in the organization can be classified into 6. 1, we have the technical activities in the organization. And the technical activities in any organization you move to are just the production, manufacturing, and adaptation. 2, you have the commercial activities, buying, selling, and exchange. Of course, 3, financial activities, people that will now search for and ensure the optimum utilization of capital by looking at the sources of capital that one are cheaper and they can easily access. Then the next is security activities within the organization, so that there can be protection of what property and of course persons working in the organization. And that the 5th, accounting activities. Then within the organization you should now have a group that takes care of what the accounting activities, such as stock taking, balance sheet, cost, and of course statistics of various activities. The big one, the managerial activities, that deals with planning, organizing, command, coordination, and of course control. It has said these 6 functions that have to be performed to operate successfully, that has to be performed in order to operate successfully in any kind of business. We've already spelled out his earlier on his 14 principles of 14 principles of management, which I earlier said. 1, division of work, authority and responsibility, discipline, unity of command, unity of direction, emphasis of subordination of personal interest to the general interest of the organization, fair remuneration to all workers. Of course, centralization of most of the activities, scala chain, equity, stability of tenure, esprit de corps, and initiative. Initiative is always very important. I always overemphasize on this idea of initiative, where workers can now be allowed to have that creative thinking capacity to enable them pick decisions of their own. And before we come to look at the limitations of this administrative management theory, I want to now get you an assignment. The assignment will now assist us to continue with our studies once we meet next time. Try to get out any organization of your choice. Then draw out the organizational structure. Draw out the organizational structure. What are the main functions of the organizational structure? By the time you now do that, we'll get back to look at the limitations the limitation of the administrative management theory, which led us to that era of what we call bureaucracy. Thank you for your wonderful listening, and we get to continue from there. Thank you very much. This